I'll go ahead and start. Good morning, everyone. I'm Elliot Ichimura. I'm the principal program lead for the Project Service Automation solution, more properly, Dynamics 365 for Project Service Automation. It just flows, right? We generally call it Project Service or PSA internally as a quick one. I've been in the project space or in service industries, actually, more properly, for the past 20 years. And have been in the engineering organization working on this product for the past about 4 years. And I'm joined by my colleague, Stephen.
My name is Stephen Sparren. There we go. My name is Stephen Sparren. I'm a program manager. I work with Elliot on the PSA team. I've got about 20 odd years in this field, primarily in the Big Four. To you, Elliot.
Okay. Well, first off, let me just take a quick poll. First off, who's already familiar with PSA? Okay, a good number of you. Who's actually using PSA today? Fewer number. Okay, good, interesting. Well, today the title of our session is around really how to augment existing applications. But we are also going to share with you some of the information, and this may be repetitive for a small number of you, that was disclosed on Monday in the project sessions. Let me also ask that question. Who was in the project session on Monday? Okay, so at least we'll be getting net new value for a good majority of you who are here today. Our conversation plan is as follows. First and foremost, I'm just going to give you a quick baseline for the few number of folks who don't know what PSA is and what it is. We're not going to go through large demo and cover the usual showcase of it, and speak to the question of how it relates to Microsoft Project. It's been an area where we have an integration, and certainly there's been asks for more improved integration, better experiences for people who want to use both Project and PSA. So we'll have a conversation around that, and what particularly changes when Microsoft Project comes to CDS for apps. So if you weren't in the Monday session and you haven't been hearing the chatter about this, Microsoft Project is replatforming in its next major version, Project Online specifically, onto CDS for apps. And so then that raises the question of, what does that mean for us? What's coming? And we'll tackle that head on. And what can you do with this now combination of PSA, Project, all running on CDS? And why is that such a great thing for you as customers, as partners? I think for all of us. And that's what we hope you'll get out of this session. And yes, augmenting existing applications is definitively part of it. We will be true to the title as well. So with that, just in brief, in terms of what it really is an end-to-end solution. The way we designed it and the concept that we started with now 4 years ago was to be able to directly address the needs of revenue-generating organizations and project-based revenue-generating organizations. And so it really came down to, how do you scope out a set of work for a client or a customer? How do you quote on it? How do you craft that contract? And then start bringing in resources against a particular work breakdown structure from an early stage of just estimating it based on generic resources. And then as you've come to the contract point and you're getting towards execution, putting named resources on that project so that you know how you're going to execute, what they're going to do, who's doing what. Then capturing time, expense, and financial information about how that project is performing and how you're delivering. Are you actually profitable? And by the way, are your people utilized well? That's a question that everybody likes to know in a professional services type context. And then finally, to build the customer and get what the objective is, which is revenue and meet profitability objectives. And then for this solution to be sufficiently standalone that you could essentially front end whatever other financial system of record that you have. That was the vision and the objective that we set out with. We're still only at version 3, and I think by most people's commentary, Microsoft takes a few versions before it gets it right. I think version 3 isn't quite right yet, but it's a lot better. We're showing great progress, and we need yet another version, I think, to really bring it together. And bringing it together is really what this rest of this session is going to be about. Yes, question?
At this point, I don't see budgeting, forecasting, and WIP generation.
exactly why version 3 isn't good enough yet.
Okay.
You called it. And as we bring together the different products that have overlapped to some degree in the marketplace, I think you'll start to see some progress on that as well. So when we think about the spectrum of offerings that we have, it looks kind of like this. It's easily arguable about which particular feature line belongs under which chevron or which step in this view, but basically we start at the sort of task level of users, people on a project team collaborating around just the tasks, the things that need to get done, not with any sort of deep richness necessarily to the data and the financial side of it, but then moving on from that sort of planner, collab-oriented world towards more of a Microsoft project, a formal, structured project management model where, yes, you have waterfall planning and to a degree, some agile and sprint type models too as well now. But in that context, being able to use baselining, for example, which is more of a formal project management mechanism, time tracking, bringing in named resources and being able to manage those resources and so on. And then at the next step, we look at PSA from our point of view as being that intermediate thing before you get to corporate-wide portfolio management. It's more about just delivery management, so that's the third step here. And that's where we bring in the integration into your sales management system, or in this case, our sales management system, as well as more formal approval processes, actual resource booking processes, and so on. And then finally, at the top tier is that true umbrella level, governance, risk, and compliance level, where you start to have formal policies, portfolio management, program management, stage gate processes for accepting projects, internal projects, cost projects, and so on. And then things like funding sources, RevRec, and other sophisticated capabilities that really go to the financial integration into the ERP system, another area where we have a known gap. And so this is the spectrum that we see as our current state. Now, we also note that Microsoft Project has been playing a role in every one of those, except for Planner being at the lower level tier, if you will. But from the project team level on up, Microsoft Project is historically and continues to be a fundamental component of that experience. It's the richest project planning and controlling sort of surface area that we can offer. And it is an integration, or has an integration, of course, directly into Project Online natively, and then through add-ins into Project Service as well as operations, or our finance and operations projects module. So it is the common denominator and the logical place to look for the best in scheduling capabilities from Microsoft. And it's with that in mind that we've essentially made that choice to bring Microsoft Project and PSA together as products, and over time we are looking at improving that experience in operations as well, leveraging some of the same assets. So when we say that, we look at what does it mean? We're building on the common data service for apps. So most of you, if you're Dynamics folks, have probably seen this slide a couple of times at this convention so far. So this, I won't belabor it, but in terms of the Power Platform, if you will, and the components of it, that is what now Project is going to build on. So Dynamics 365, we still have the PSA component, but now we have Office 365 beginning to use flows and Power Apps, and then Project explicitly building on the CDS for Apps platform. So the benefit of this is we start to get all of your data about project, both plans, executions, and now as you start bringing in the Dynamics components, the financial aspects, and eventually the ERP aspects, all into one platform where you can get that data and then start using that data with flows and Power Apps and so on to build other things that are part of the execution process for a project in your organization. And that's really where we get into the discussion around augmenting projects and PSA. So without further ado, let me go ahead and move into demo mode. This is, and let me refresh that just to make sure the session hasn't ended. This is the project home. This shipped actually about a few weeks ago and is globally available in commercial data centers today. Project Home is part of Microsoft Project Online, and you just get it with your project SKUs. And its concept is fairly simple, but I believe powerful. And it is to be able to bring together your most recently used project objects, if you will, or links to them in one place. Today, you just see project and you see some roadmap items. We will start to see modern project soon. That'll be one of the next demo items. And also Azure DevOps projects, formerly VSTS projects. At some point, Planner, and then further afield, we look to see the Jiras of the world and other applications also being connected in here, because our objective is to help people who work on projects be able to get to their projects in one place. And once you start to get to them in one place, you also start to expect the data to be available in one cohesive environment. And so there's a logical driving function for us to start seeing more and more project-related applications and experiences manifesting and or building off of this context. Of course, you should also be able to favorite the items most recently used, just like any other authoring tool you may use. Isn't very useful unless you can put your favorite ones that are currently priorities for you up at the top. And also be able to create net new items. So let's go ahead and create, actually no, before we do that, let me just show you PWA, just to show you it's real. So this is a PWA project that is going to be accessible on the ongoing basis from Project Home. And as you see here, it's just a simple sample one. So discovery phase, analysis phase, design, and so on. A couple of subtasks and such. Just keep these in mind because you're going to see them coming up again later. And then the next step after the Project Home is roadmap. Now this is going to be generally available latter part of this half, so let's say targeting around December, maybe a little bit earlier. And roadmap is a surface area for helping you bring together and visualize different projects in terms of the things you're working on and where do you stand in those projects in terms of progress. And this is not master projects, it's its own kind of construct. Think of it as a program management tool, so you can start pulling together different projects and visualizing them. Let me just give this a name so we recognize it when we see it again later. Okay, so we've got William owning it. And let's go ahead and add a row to illustrate the point. So we'll put in a PWA demo project. And connect to a project online project. So what I'm doing is connecting to that PWA project I showed you a moment ago. And importantly, the connection mechanism, for those of you from a dynamics point of view should appreciate this, is Microsoft Flow. So the roadmap is using flows to connect to another data source. You, of course, have to confirm and opt in to connect to it. And then it will retain that connection information so that every time you come back to the roadmap, it can refresh, or it'll be refreshing essentially on a periodic basis in the background, so you see the latest status on the projects that you're connecting to. So we'll connect, and then we'll go ahead and just look for a couple of items. Let's see, discovery phase. Okay. So as you can see, we're just pulling in data through the flows into this view. And let me also add just 2 more sub-items for further detail. Okay. So now you can start to look at your project. This is just one. I'll show you another one in a moment. And look at it through the perspective of what's on track, what might be a potential problem, which might put something else at risk, and then other things because of that can't be statused yet. And that's just to illustrate as a quick example of how sort of you can quickly represent the status of one project in a portfolio, if you will, or a program of projects. And let's go ahead and add also a key date for that. Let's see. I'll put that out in a terrible time to go do a pilot in any company, but we'll put it in December. and add a key date. So you see a key date shows up here as a pilot. So there are, at the program level, key dates, master milestones that you can put in, and you can, of course, import and pull in those milestones from specific projects as well, down to any leaf node object within a PWA project. Further, we can add an Azure DevOps project, and I see we have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Use kind of filtering or if-then analysis in order to have the automation? Because what you've just done, you've done that manually. You've analyzed that manually and you have set statuses.
This is pre-release code, so the answer is no, not at this point in time. Whether we'll enable that or not is an excellent question, and that's the kind of thing where, actually, let me just go ahead and connect. There's a feedback item, because this is an Office product. There's a nice little feedback view down at the bottom, and you'll be able to give your feedback and actually vote for precisely these things. It should be important to note that our program management team and our engineers as well, we look at the feedback very, very closely and watch it. So if you want to get your needs and requirements addressed in the product, the single best way is to crowdsource voting for that objective. Hopefully with, of course, the right set of colleagues in program management, project management disciplines. So yes, the way in which you get to stuff right now may be a little bit simplistic, but it's a good starting point to show you at least how you can start to bring in objects from different applications and then begin to show the relative positioning of them. Now, as a sneak peek of some of the things that are coming next, one of the things we've certainly been asked for is the ability to snapshot this. So if you have a quarterly steering committee meeting and you want to take a snapshot and record that as this is what we agreed to in the meeting, and then next quarter bring up the status and look at what slipped, what's on track, and get that visual comparative view. These are the kinds of capabilities that are coming with the product. So it's really about what do professional program managers and others who are trying to convey information and to get a handle on the scope of work that they have under them and are responsible for, and to coordinate that and then report it up and report it out to the relevant stakeholders, which also means there's Teams integration, and so you can add members as well to this particular collaboration surface, so other parties can come in and bring in their particular projects and highlight the things that they need to as appropriate. Okay, so that is the beginnings of the next generation of portfolio and program management in Project Online, and you will be able to connect to natively to PSA and other Dynamics project-oriented capabilities there, and as I said, also third-party applications over time with connectors. So with that, that now brings us to the last key piece, which is the core of what I think all of you are probably here for, which is projects. And how do we manage projects in the future? So here we have the modern project, and we'll go ahead and create one. Okay. And so when you create a modern project from the project home, what it's doing is actually creating that project in CDS. And it's doing it using the PSA data structures, or what we would call the project common data model that we're gradually formulating here. So between Microsoft Project Online and CDS and PSA, we're getting to a common definition of what a project is. And so at the time of creation, it's actually created that in PSA, and I'll show you that in a moment. But first, let's just take a look at the modern experience. You'll note this is very minimalist. We'll add a little bit more, but not too much, because the whole objective is to give you the most canvas space, if you will, available that we can on the screen for you to edit and craft that WBS when you're trying to scope out the work. So let's just do a similar thing as we did before. Okay, and we also add insert. we had notice how performant it is. This is just this is the new React grid that is also in PSA version 3. So over the last couple of editions of PSA, we've been working very hard at essentially coalescing around a common core, if you will, around the project structure. So we have now the same shared grid. It's a co-investment by both Office and Dynamics in the grid structure for the WBS. And, but what's backing this, unlike PSA, which has backing it, PSA's rather junior scheduling system, what's backing this is actually the full full Microsoft project scheduling engine in the cloud, running in an Azure stateful service, and doing the calculations and changes on the fly. So let's go ahead and put in a little more data here before we show you some of the other things that are possible. And notice this add columns, something you haven't had in PSA land. For those of you who are project users, this should be very familiar. And you'll see that there are quite a few familiar fields in here that you can add to the project. So I'm going to put in work, and I'm going to say that this is 5 days. Put in another task after this. And we'll just go 100 hours. Okay. And then we could also put in a resource or two. And notice how once you've put in individuals, this is true of version 3 as well of PSA, but as soon as you put in resources, they are automatically added to the team, and you can start just putting them on different tasks as appropriate. No booking. Booking comes afterwards instead of before, and you can also create generic resources as well. So we'll call it my generic resource. Oh, nope, I forgot. I have to do the add. And it's probably not in this particular version. Sorry, what was that question? Yes?
The resources, they're coming from where? AD or some previous resource pool?
At the moment, they're coming from the bookable resource set that is in PSA. Now, one of the things we're working on is looking at the full AD structure, and can we go ahead and automatically generate bookable resources from your organizational AD? And that is the aspiration. We're working on performance and other challenges that introduces. So good question, though. It is highly desirable for any organization to be able to just put anybody in the organization on a project and not have to wait for that. And so that is one of the things that we're working on. So now that I've just shown you quickly the new surface area, I want to show you one other important factor here, which is this. So let me go ahead and go to that project. Let's prove it. So there is my Ignite Modern project. So you are in the PSA surface area here. You'll note that it has now created the stub, if you will, of the project in PSA automatically in the back end. For any required fields, it's using defaulting logic to fill those in as appropriate. And then when we go to the schedule, you will see that it is loading Microsoft Project, because what it's doing is going to that stateful service in the back end for this particular project and loading in to see the data that's there. And as you can see, it's a direct match between the two. And the best and most fun part is, watch carefully as I do this. You can paste down and look at what happened over in the other session. Yeah.
That's exciting.
This is co-auth for projects. And this is a powerful new opportunity and capability that we bring through the joint collaboration between Office and Dynamics. We are really taking the full advantage of that project scheduling engine that project has built. 35 years of investment behind that thing. There is no way in a couple of years we're going to catch up to that. What's the right thing to do? Use the best that is available in the marketplace, bring it in, and leverage that. And in exchange, Project is uptaking universal resource scheduling. So let me tell you where we're going. First off, what you just saw is Microsoft's modern project roadmaps and the project scheduling service, all running with backing in the CDS for apps. And then Project is uptaking time and expense, universal resource scheduling, and approvals from the Dynamics PSA product, if you will. And so that will help build out the Project Online next generation experience. Generally speaking, what you could do in Project Online before, you would be able to do in the new modern project. It won't be 100% parity. The whole idea is to reimagine how organizations work around projects going forward, and a much more collaborative, teams-intensive type environment. Co-auth makes sense. Not check out, modify, check or publish, check in. You shouldn't have to do that. Yes, you might want to make sure you're working in different branches of the project so you're not stepping on each other. Those are things that people will learn how to work with. But that is part of this new vision, and that we are sharing in that vision with the project organization. And then finally, what does PSA bring? PSA brings many of the financial components to the picture because we're a biz apps organization and process. So advanced project costing and pricing. If you think about multi-currency, multi-org, and then the multi-dimensional pricing and costing capabilities that we released in version 3, these are the kinds of things that you need to have the Dynamics SKUs for. And so this is where PSA delivers that, as well as integration into the sales capabilities for the sales business process. So this gives you just sort of that first sense for what this new thing and the shape of the future is. And before your question, one other thing is that for customers already on PSA today, there will be a direct upgrade path from current state PSA to this new converged application. So that's something that we'll expect, not at GA, but some reasonable period after GA, you'll be able to upgrade to this. At GA, you'll be wanting to use net new instances, learn how it works, test it, figure out how your customizations should work, and so on. And I'll take your question.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to know what your roadmap or development plan will be. On Monday, we learned that in half year 1, 2019, we're going to see the modern project with the new scheduling service, and we're fully convinced of your overall pictures of tying those things together. So I'd like to understand, will you all bring it in one hit, or are you building it one by one, module by module, bringing those things together with an end-to-end user experience?
The target is end-to-end, but you can't do that in one shot.
Yeah.
So the first order thing is, the sequence is home is already shipped, roadmap ships next, modern project ships Q4-ish.
Yeah.
And I probably get slapped by marketing for even putting that way, but that's where I expect it'll ship. When you look at the PSA components and the changes that we have to make in order for both products to be able to use them and use them at the relative scale and scope at which they operate, I expect that they will come out in a staged manner after that. And so you can expect from the most required and necessary for project to work like Project Online used to, you could expect some sequencing that looks like that.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I think it's a good time to turn it over to my colleague, Steve, so that you can talk a little bit more about how we can now augment not just PSA, but also project to a level and certain with guardrails.
Thanks, Elliot. I really appreciate that. So they asked me to talk about augmenting. Give me a second to change over. Augmenting projects, and I was thinking about scenarios that we could work towards. But before I get there, I kind of wanted to go back and make sure everybody in the room, understood some of the TLAs, the three-letter acronyms that we throw around. The Unified Client is a Power App. It's a rendering tool that allows a modern model-driven app to be rendered. It's designed to be meta-based driven. It's designed to allow you to easily create forms. It is fully extendable. You can add your own controls. We have a bunch of controls in there. It's backed by workflows, which is essentially flow. And it becomes the platform that we've used for building our business applications. When we talk to business customers, UC is the solution we go in there with to marry our applications into their business process. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. There is another type of Power App called a Canvas app. And the Canvas app is more of a pixel-perfect type scenario where you have a very specific thing you're trying to solve. And when we were talking about augmenting, I thought, well, why don't we try and create a Power App and show some of this cool stuff that we're now able to do with Project Being on CDS. So Elliot alluded to everything, well, he mentioned that everything is now in the Common Data Service. If you don't know what the Common Data Service is, the Common Data Service is a service that provides all the entities we have across Microsoft in a common format. So we think of all of our assets ultimately having capability to talk to, read and write to the Common Data Service. This includes things obviously like project service, field service, finance and operations. You'll see I've got a little caveat there with a synchronization service. And then on the right-hand side, Power Apps. And then the Microsoft partners yourselves. You're able to go and build stuff that either sits on top of the CDS directly or connects to the CDS through open technologies like OData. With regards to finance operations, I just want to touch on that a little bit. I don't know if there's anybody in the room that's dealing with that. A couple of you guys. And so you see the picture that Elliot presented earlier. On the left-hand side, we started at Planner, and on the right-hand side, we had F&O, right? And there's about 9 million lines of X++ code in F&O and 20 years of development around the projects module within F&O. So it is extremely complicated, and it is extremely capable. Now, the vision is to try and unify all of these things together, but we have to do that in a mature and responsible way that we are involved with the customers. So we're going to be going after each of these industries programmatically, and we're going to be building scenarios that really work end-to-end for that particular industry. Today, what we have capability on is a service called the Data Synchronization Service. The Data Synchronization Service allows us to take data that's in finance and operations and synchronize it with PSA. So we're able to pull in contracts, projects, contract line detail, milestones into F&O to give you that sort of financial view that F&O provides. This is a key area of investment at the moment we're trying to solve. As I mentioned, the F&O implementation is extensive, and PSA is fairly young in capability. So expect to see a lot of change in this space. And we're really looking for feedback if you're willing to provide around how you think we could improve. But on that, let me go back to sort of producing a Power App. So I'm not really a developer, and they said to me this thing is citizen development, and I said, well, I'm recently a US citizen, so I'm sure I can figure out how to do this. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to log into Power Apps, and I'm going to come up with a scenario that shows a resource board all up, bookings, reservations across the organization. So today in PSA, if you use it today, you can see it within the project, but you don't really have a high-level heat map of where it is and who's been booked, and also who is overbooked and who's underbooked at a high level. So I thought, well, that's an ask. We get that fairly often, and it would be quite an easy demo to put together. We're going to start from scratch, because we're scary like that. So give me a second to just get in here. While that's loading, let me get you onto the next slide to explain the structure of the Power Apps architecture. So underneath we have the Common Data Service, and on the top is the Power App. The Power App is the container, if you like, of the visual experience. I'm going to be taking some resource assignment data out of the Common Data Service. We have a plugin that we've written that consolidates that gives us what we call a resource reservation view. I'm then going to bring that in to my Power App using a connector, standard connector, that's out of the box. I'm going to drop some controls on the screen with a button and a grid. We're going to take that button, we're going to wire it into what they call a collection inside of a Power App. And the collection is just an array in memory. You're just putting somewhere to store it. I'm then going to take that collection and just do an Excel kind of formula. It's going to be a little bit of a crazy Excel formula. You'll find when you build Power Apps, they start off as a simple Excel formula, and then you end up building. But you end up with something really cool, and it's fairly understandable at the end of the day. Again, I'm not a developer, so I'm just going to go through this process like you would, so bear with me. And then that result set's going to be pushed onto the screen. So hopefully we'll have something that's pretty cool. And let's see, where's my window? Okay. So we're going to go to apps. We're going to say create an app. And we're going to, you could choose to create a phone app, but I think this kind of a view is more likely going to be run on somebody's desktop. So I'm going to create it as a tablet app. We're brave, we don't need to go through that. Okay, so this is a blank app. This is what Power Apps presents you. Behind the scenes, what I've already done, and I just want to, full disclosure, is I've already created a connection. So with Power Apps, you create connections to the different sources of your data. You can have CDS data, you can have multiple instances of CDS, you can have multiple instances of Dynamics. So I've already just created that. I just want to show you that. That was the first step. Within the application now, we're going to go and I'm just going to drop in a grid. So let's have a look and see what sort of data I can get. So I'm just going to drop in a grid. I'm going to say, I need to add a data source. I've got to get this data from somewhere. It's going to ask me, which connection would I like to use? And you see I've got a couple of them. I'm going to just pick Dynamics 365. It's going to go through, it's going to ask me which instance, and I happen to have a couple, so you probably will have a little less. I have an Ignite version here. This is now logging me into my Dynamics 365 instance, and it's querying all the list of tables and entities that are available to me. I can go through here and say, well, I'm looking for resource reservation. There we go. I can hit that. I can say hit connect. Now it's going to go and query all the fields that are within that data source and allow me to just kind of drag them onto that grid. Here we go. Okay, so we don't need created on, but maybe we want to have something like hours, maybe the reservation date, and I'm going to bring in the type of reservation, so if it's a booking or if it's going to be an assignment. Now you look at this data, it's not really usable, it's just a grid of data. It's not kind of nice actually, and I could probably just, do the same kind of export into Excel. What I really want to do is give me some sort of grouping on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out this grid. This grid was just to show you how you can easily connect to the data. I'm going to delete this grid, and what we're going to do is I'm going to add a button. This button is going to execute an Excel function. So what's cool about Power Apps, if you've never used Power Apps before, is that every property on a button, whatever it is, you can choose if it's pressed, you can choose its color, whatever property it is actually an Excel function. So you're able to go and change if you wanted to make this, a different color, it's quite simply to do that. I could do that, or I could go and, type in some mathematical Excel formula. You can also tie those Excel formulas to other parts of the application, and it'll naturally update. So that's just something that's pretty cool about Power Apps if you haven't played with it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and say, on select, sorry, let me make sure I get this right. It was on select, right? I'm going to cheat a little bit, because if I was to build that formula, it will take a little while. I'm going to create a collection in RAM that was that table. So what you saw earlier, we're going to now execute that. So this command collect, I'm going to just open this up so we can see it a little bit better. This command collect instructs Power Apps to go and create something in memory called report, and I want to group by, out of that resource reservation data source, the name and the resource. So if we go and have a look inside of our collections here, you'll see that there is one, and I've now grouped by name. So Spencer Lowe, if I go and click on that, I'll see all the records that now relate to Spencer Lowe. So it's just like an in-RAM pivot table, right? I haven't displayed anything based on that yet, but the button has now created the structure in RAM that's consolidated that data together. I'm going to take it and step it up a little bit. I'm going to go and say, well, hang on, I actually need a little bit more fields than what I brought through there. I only had, within the collection here, I only got it by name. What I actually would like is I'd like it to add up the hours, maybe by month. So I'd like a column that says month number, maybe a year, and maybe the hours, so we can group by month. So I'm going to go back into this. I'm going to paste in a bit of a longer formula. Well, I'll share these formulas at the end. They're not rocket science. Again, I'm not a developer. But I added a bunch of columns that were specific to the source data, because the source data was in a date format. And so like in Excel, you would normally go and have to add another column to split the data out. I added a column for year and month so that I could split out the data on year and month and group by those. I also then grouped the data by those fields and added a sum to give me the total hours. So if I execute the button now, what I get in RAM, if I go back to File, I go look at my collection, I get an updated view here that says, oh, okay, now by month, I've got the total hours, I've got the year and the booking type, and the name. So we're getting closer to the data I want. I just now need to display it. It doesn't really, doesn't help me to have it in RAM. So I'm going to go move this button to the right. Let's go and add something that will put something on the screen here. So a gallery item is simply a list view that allows me to tie back to any data source. So I've dropped this on here. I'm going to go and pick up that data source over here. I'm going to say, no, I don't want to get the data source that I sourced from. I now want to work off the data source that the button created, because that's where the data is that I want to display. So I hit that. You'll see it kind of does a best stab at cleaning things up, but not very good. But how about if we just move things around a little bit? So let's take Spencer Lowe. Let's put him over here. Maybe I want to do this. Actually, let's swap those two around. Subtitle, let's make this the name. And that way I get it nice and bold. I don't have a photo for him, but I have his name. I'm going to take that one out. Okay, so at the moment within the list I have just the name. I'm going to go and add in a couple of columns because I was aiming to do this by column. So let's do this and say, actually I'd like that to be total hours, and maybe this one I'd like it to be year. All right. That's still not exactly what I wanted because I still wanted to be able to group it by month. So what I need to do is I'd need to change this list a little bit. You'll see I also find that I have multiple views or multiple entries for Veronica. So I need to change what's listed down here. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to go across to the data. At the moment, it's just pulling the data out of report. So it's just listing whatever report is. What I'd like to do is actually just limit it down to unique items within that report so that I only have Veronica listed once. So I'm going to do that first. Now I've brought that data in. Let's have a look what it's done here. Take this one out. by changing the report underneath, it's changed all the fields. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to take these and let's add some months. How about if I do sort of January? So we're going to have this one be the January one. I've created a formula as well that's going to go and do a lookup within that report for that particular month where it's a particular type of booking. In this case, the reservation type is booking. I'll show you that in a second here. I'll put it in here, it'll be a bit easier to see. So I'm asking it to say on the item that I have, where it's the month equals 1, I want the first month of the year, and the reservation type, the reservation type is booking, and for this year, I'd like to see the total hours. So now all of a sudden, I've got the total hours for that month, which would be January. We can do the same and paste another one. We can just move it over here, and in that one, we can make it month 2 maybe. And now you can slowly start to grasp how it's possible to add those different fields in a list, such that you could almost build a custom report. Let's do that. So I'm just going to do now what I did find by playing around with this was that I ended up just going crazy and just adding more and more and more. And as I mentioned earlier, you can imagine just carrying on adding more and more of these fields for January, February, March. You can also add additional features here. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I do want to show you kind of where I ended up on it because I made it, so I feel like it's cool. So if you just keep digging away at it, it's exactly the same approach as what I had there. I ended up with something that had some sort of color across the top. I kind of put a header at the top. I put some filters on the right-hand side. I added some additional buttons because I wanted to maybe export the data. And now we can play that out. Hit CDS data, that's the button that does the same thing. I get a list now of all the bookings with a little bit of a heat map. So what I did on the color was equate the color to the number value and just bump up the green. So you'll see it kind of changes over depending on the value. So that would be booking, assignments, and then reconciliation. I simply just did the booking minus assignments to give me a view of where the gaps between the two. And this took me a good 2 hours to figure out. I'm pretty averse with Excel, but not a developer. So that was pretty cool. So this is the kind of thing that you can do with Power Apps to extend all the data entities within the CDS for scenarios that aren't necessarily native to the application. Within sort of 15 minutes, we have a very high-level resource aggregate view, but it's not that hard to actually have it click further in and go and get sort of project details on those numbers. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to show you. That was augmenting sort of with Power Apps. Something else I thought I'd show you. And let me jump through this one here. I added this to the deck so you guys could see it, and there's a little screenshot of what it was. The other thing I wanted to talk about was something new that we have coming. It's also a big ask, is specifically around timesheets. I know in version 2 we had some challenges. And the team in Redmond have worked really hard to try and solve this. So I thought I'd show you a little bit of pre-release around what's coming. This isn't anything out there just yet, but it does solve some of the connectivity scenarios back to, extensibility scenarios that you would typically have or require within timesheets. So I've just logged into a dev instance of our application. I'm just going to go into time entries, and I'll talk through what you're seeing here. So we've gone back to having a decent time entry view that gives you a per day view per project. And I'll go and add a time entry to show you. Our time entry is now utilizing Quick Create on the right-hand side. And you'll see down the bottom here, this morning I added a thing called Ignite extension and dropped in an option set So this means for partners now where you have requirements around, I need to extend around start time, end time, I need to extend around state, US state for tax purposes, this is now capable in terms of Quick Create to be able to do that. You'll see that that data then is then displayed on the grid within this first column here, and that's done through a view within Dynamics. So we're resolving the extensibility question around timesheets. We also are bringing in the ability to copy from previous period. You'll be able to specify dates. And the other one is recall, which is been a big ask as well. So within this grid control, we're still looking for feedback. We want to make sure that this experience is your ultimate time capture experience. So if you'd like to reach out to me afterwards, and I'd like to set up some time and understand if there's scenarios. Sure, maybe you have a question.
This one is connected with the CRM.
Yes.
Time entry. What about Dynamics? Which
So
is
F&O you're talking about?
F&O, I'm talking, yes. Because that one is far, 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 far more than that.
Yep. It's on our roadmap to resolve. That's part of that integration story between FinOps and PSA. The capabilities underneath this are the CDS, and so we're looking to get parity to that. I think where F&O is really strong is around expense, particularly. So if I'm just showing time, and probably that's a different conversation, is to figure out how to solve that problem. But we're looking to make this an all-up approach. We want to make sure that this actually would allow you to track time not just against a project, but potentially against a work item or an opportunity. And so when we think of what we're building here, this isn't just about a project task. And that might be a little different to kind of the F&O build. Anything else? Any other questions? So that's some of the extensibility scenarios we have. Let me go back to the deck quickly. So you want to go through some key takeaways, Elliot, with me? Sure.
So I think key things that we do want you to recall from this, you've certainly seen the practicality of creating applications very quickly through the Power Apps framework. And then again, we're adding extensibility options into some of the previously locked down experiences like timesheets and expenses. And in the broader picture and the long-term point of view, it's really these things around what project's doing. So bringing their powerful scheduling engine to the Dynamics platform and making it available for us to leverage in the Dynamics context. Uptaking resource scheduling from Dynamics. So importantly, it says one resource pool at the far right there. That is the opportunity now between Microsoft Project Online and Dynamics, is that you can schedule resources in Project and their availability, assuming you book them, they will be booked in the Dynamics system alongside your field service resources, your sales resources and others, and people who are multifunctional, who are doing work in all those different types of contexts. And you'll know who's available at an enterprise level in Microsoft Project Online, as well as in PSA and Dynamics. And then as they uptake our time, expense, and approvals, the additional benefit you get there is that Project Online is no longer its island over there that has to be separately integrated into this, that, and the other ERP, alongside PSA being integrated in. All that data comes into one place in CDS, and yes, you may need to integrate into some other ERP system if you don't have one of ours, where we will prioritize to deliver native integration. But that is that opportunity to essentially consolidate different types of work, different types of actuals in one system, and then make them flow to the destination that they need to. For our part, we'll continue to invest in the financial functionality and make that available to project users. So project users will get the benefit of some improvements in their cost management capabilities. They will need to step up to some of the dynamic SKUs for, again, the multi-currency on the same project, multi organizational unit, borrowed and loaned resources, intercompany, those kinds of things. But they will still get some of the financial capabilities that we offer in the Dynamics platform, quote unquote, for free within the Project Online SKUs. And we will do work to improve the capability set there. And most importantly for the project side is that they will get that extensibility option that you just saw from the Power Apps experience. Is there are boatloads of opportunities to take that data, even if you don't buy the Dynamics side of the picture and you're just taking project, there's so much you can do to deliver project execution processes where you create flows. The moment a particular task is marked as done, kick off a flow to go get somebody alerted to go do this other thing. Send them to a particular task and use the task form or object in order to give them some boilerplate content to go fill out and go push it into SharePoint for them to fill it out. These are all the kinds of automation activities and opportunities that become available through this combination of the platforms and the capability sets that we have. And ultimately, we are eliminating the divide between project and PSA. We have work to do to eliminate some of the other divides in our broader portfolio, but we have to start somewhere, and this is the one where we had the most frequent asks from our customers to go figure it out, and that is what we are doing, and as you saw in the demo, it is well underway, and we're looking forward to GAing a fantastic product for you in the second half. So with that, we're a little bit early, but we'll thank you for those of you who are staying, and we'll take any other questions that you may have at this point. Formal questions, or we can do after the fact questions. Yes, sir.
I have another one for you. How about project collaboration and Project Online? Nowadays, project sites are used heavily for collaborating in the teams on documents, risk issues, and stuff like that. Where will you put it in your future scenario?
So collaboration will be rich in the Project Online space, so in terms of native Teams integration and other kinds of capabilities you would expect. We will make a case-by-case decision as to whether or not to duplicate that experience in the PSA world or actually allow people to just open it in project and get the full collaboration environment. So that's something where our design patterns, we haven't sorted it all out yet, but that's an active area of discussion of what's the best surface area for the collab side of it versus the transactional system of record type activities that you might be doing as an individual participating in a process. And so that's a distinction. Is it process-oriented work that you're doing, or is it collaborative work that you're doing? And sometimes you need both. And that's the sort of balancing act that we're doing. Others? Yes?
The next one. How about the licensing? I mean, the licensing in PSA and contains Project Online licenses. The PSA contains also Power App and Flow P2, I think, plan. I don't know. I think because you're able to use it, you know. And how about the new project, if they switch now to the CDS, are you going to merge somehow the licensing, or will it be the same or similar? Or
so at the moment, there are no SKU changes at all. What we're doing for project is that because it's switching platforms, you'll get a certain level of the platform capabilities with it.
Yeah.
As far as demarcations, honestly, I'm not the licensing guy, so I don't know what the game plan is. You saw the different blocks and the layering. I would expect that there's some kind of step-up type, and better together portfolio bundle, something like that, but I'm just not the guy to be able to answer that. We're in engineering, we're building it, and we're going to make sure that it works cleanly and seamlessly, but licensing is something where I'm going to have to ask our marketing guys to
let's get back
to
the technical guy. So it's about the integration of the project client. So
yes.
Currently we have let's call it an add-in. That's the first version.
Yes.
Is there planned something native integration?
Yes. So the plan for the project client is after we GA the online-only version, which is basically we're cloud first and we're doing online first. The project client will come along afterwards and have a native experience for interacting directly with the same project that's in the cloud. Now, the key question that is going to be your follow-on question is, what about offline? And offline is the one where we haven't figured out what our game plan is yet, because we are desperately trying to get away from the check-in, check-out, publish type experience. No one likes it. We get that. We don't like it. But so there's the whole question of, if the last one in wins, you don't want a project manager taking it offline, changing everything, coming in, and then just changing everything for everybody, right? There needs to be some level of control. What that looks like and how to make it less onerous is the challenge. And so we have got tons of design people looking at different options and experiences, but that won't come for a number of months after we GA the online version.
Okay, and the last one.
Yes.
About Project Online and the new service. I mean, in PSA, we have the nice, not like tab-like navigation. In Project Online, we do have project detail pages on the left side. And so when project goes onto the Power App platform or a Power Platform, are they also changing the whole user interface, maybe also using the PSA kind of, model-driven apps?
So they are not, the implementation for, if you think about the millions of users a project, at the scale at which we operate, we have a more locked down experience, highly performant, but the navigation and the options and other things will be a subset of what's possible in a PSA context. So PSA remains model-driven. Yeah. The project surface area largely is a very high-performance surface area that's much more limited in terms of what you can do with that. And as far as extensibility, it's a rich topic of discussion, and we're working on what the right level of extensibility is to ensure that you get good experiences in both surface areas, but appropriate to the audiences and the folks who are going to be using those. But so for the do whatever you want kind of surface area, that remains the model-driven side of it.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got one more.
Hey, I'm coming from Project World.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question in regards to, when is it possible to actually embrace the CDS for Project Online? So whenever can we make the connection so we can get the entities of Project Online into CDS?
So the functionality that you saw demoed today, 98% of those entities are the PSA entities as they are in version 3. Because version 3, the last 2 releases of PSA, the reason the front-end functionality was a bit light in terms of improvements was because we were doing a ton of architectural work in the back end to get it ready for this announcement.
Okay.
So if you go in, it's not that we aren't going to change things, but version 3 is mostly the foundation for the new modern project experience. Okay. And so the short answer is, go work with PSA to understand how it's designed, how the entities are structured. The areas where change may occur is in the schedule impacting fields and some of the fields where we start looking at the extensible add a column, add a field experience within the WBS and project. Which of those are we going to reflect in the task entity? We're not going to take all 1,300 plus of those, not a chance. It hits performance badly. So we will look at and pick and choose, and then later on the extensibility front, we will provide capabilities for you to pick a particular column that you want to actually save into CDS in the task entities and be addressable and readable. The reverse direction of changing the data in CDS and having it go into the project is something that will be even later than that, just because of the engineering challenges involved. But having that bidirectional ability to work in CDS and change the project is the ultimate goal. But we also have to be sure that we know what that does to the user experience, because you don't want automation running and changing tasks, like 1,000 tasks all at once, and having people just saying, what the heck is going on in my UI, because everything's changing. So we have user experiences that we have to balance, and that's some of the investment that we're doing.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
We currently have a lot of EPTs that are customized. How does that incorporate with the modern? Can you create templates with the modern project for EPTs to create your project?
Oh, MPPs, okay. So the template construct is in our near-term roadmap. Many people like to have templates, but the priority one is open, save as, rename. And so copy a project. So you could, in theory, have just a folder or a set of projects that are your golden ones and copy from those. That'd be a starting point. And then actual formal templates would come relatively soon. I can't say in what time frame. And then to get the existing ones in, you're probably going to have to wait for the client to connectivity to be there, because then you can just open them and bring them in and save them in as templates in the online environment. So you can recreate them from day one. You can do copy, save as kind of model as a starting point. And then once the client connectivity is there, you can start bringing them in masse and start creating templates.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for staying. And we will take any other sort of one-off questions afterwards. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot.